Welcome back to the third segment in our study of the Bill of Rights, which is on the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment states, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Too many people misunderstand the Second Amendment, the spirit of it, and how it really reads. Let us start off with an example of how some students in our schools have learned how this amendment reads and why they have no idea what the Second Amendment actually states. This is from a school text in the 1970s. It is the first time I encountered the erroneous teaching in schools, but similar instances appear in modern Common Core textbooks. The people have the right to keep and bear arms, but Congress may regulate private weapons. Learning the Second Amendment this way, it is no wonder that many people have no problem with Congress infringing on the right to keep and bear arms. Congress may regulate private weapons? Wow! The amendment actually reads that the right shall not be infringed. Period. Not that Congress can regulate them. Increasingly, the modern education one receives distorts how the Second Amendment is taught. It is no wonder that people will vote for those who want to confiscate our guns. Here are two more examples. This is a more cartoonish version. Amendment 2, 1791, right to bear arms. This amendment states that people have the right to certain weapons, providing that they register them and they have not been in prison. Note that the amendment is taught in a very loose paraphrasing rather than the actual wording. The actual amendment makes no mention of the need for registering arms. It is the first step towards confiscation. This text is preparing the student for such action in the future as being legal. This next example is very often the wording being used or taught in schools today. The people have the right to keep and bear arms in a state militia. In this example, it is shown as if these are the exact words of the amendment. They're not. The student hasn't got a clue what the actual wording is. It pervades the idea that only in a militia do you have the right to keep and bear arms. And yet the actual amendment says the people, the right of the people, everyone. And the Supreme Court has ruled many times that the term militia means every able-bodied man. Let's look at the definition of the word infringed. And the best place to look is what the word meant as close to the time of the writing of the Bill of Rights as we can find. An American Dictionary of the English Language by Noah Webster, 1828, when it says, infringe, to break, to violate, to transgress, to neglect to fulfill or obey, as to infringe a law. So in other words, government cannot in any way or manner curtail the right of a citizen, the people, to own a firearm. In fact, the amendment says arms, not firearms or muskets. It means all types of weapons. Really? Let's look at why this amendment was written to begin with. And some may find this a little controversial, but true. What had just happened to bring about the United States? A war for independence. And how did it start? It started because the British Army was about to disarm the local people who had formed a militia for self-protection. Their own government, the British, was about to disarm them in order to impose even greater control. It is hard to control people who are armed as well as the government. This the Americans could not abide, so they stood up to their own government and fired the famous shot heard round the world in defense of liberty. They knew that if they were disarmed, as a result in the future, they would come completely under a totalitarian state, since power corrupts. It is the nature of government to want more power and then even more. Let me make this clear by quoting part of the amendment again. It says, the security of a free state. In other words, having citizens armed was to preserve a free state. Where had a non-free state emerged? From their own government. The purpose of the people being armed is to guarantee that we would remain free in the future from our own government, not to hunt down and kill Bambi. An armed citizenry is a free citizenry. A government which fears the people owning weapons is a government to be feared. The growth of regulations over guns started in the period of Prohibition, when gangsters like Machine Gun Kelly used the so-called Tommy gun or Thompson machine gun. It was an automatic weapon that gave great firepower to anyone using it, and it gave fits to law enforcement. Now, you can't blame them for wanting it curtailed, but the best of intentions can go very wrong, and in this case, it has led to regulation or outright banning of many types of weapons. Before World War II, an American could own any type of weapon, including cannon. After all, remember that the men at Concord and Lexington had cannon too. The word used in the amendment is arms, not muskets. We are not far away from total confiscation of all firearms. This is how it is in too many of the so-called free countries today, as well as in dictatorships. Here in the United States, all it would take for gun confiscation is one bad election, where the majority of Congress, who think like socialists, to vote in such a ban and require that the citizens turn in their guns. And if you don't think this is a possibility, you haven't paid much attention as to the candidates who are running for office and what they think. We see supporters of the Second Amendment with bumper stickers saying, "You can take my gun when you pry it from my cold, dead hands." Yet there are ways to get even the most diehard gun advocate to turn in his weapon. What if he received a phone call from his local school saying that they had his children, and until you turn in your weapons, they will not be released to you? What if the electricity were to be turned off to his home during the winter? What if the government forced your boss to fire you? A totalitarian government has many ways to get people to acquiesce. And if he's a lone wolf in his neighborhood, and the community is not organized to resist unconstitutional actions by the government, then he's really alone. How is your community? How does it vote? Do you get involved in community organization, especially to educate your neighbors as to what liberty really means? To get them to understand the threat in modern times to the control of socialist communism? To get them to understand the Bill of Rights? If not, you will lose in the long run because you will be alone, isolated, and easily succumbed. And your neighbors will shout epithets at you as you put on your own chains. The study of the Bill of Rights by you is only the first step in your responsibility to your family and children. The next step is getting involved in educating others about their rights. Your own neighborhood is a good place to start. Start by showing videos in your own home and invite the neighbors to attend. Once citizens are disarmed, you will end up with a government that totalitarians want, not a free country. Get involved. What good are the Bill of Rights if you are the only one in your community who understands and appreciates them?